for Canadians here in the United States, the first 6 months of President Donald Trump's second term have left many feeling like outsiders, in some cases like an adversary on American soil.
Donald Trump sees negotiation as a way to show power. In his second term, he still thinks that way, especially with Canada. He added heavy taxes on Canadian steel, aluminum, and cars. He wanted full control and even made fun of Canada publicly. When Canada tried to fight back by creating a digital tax, Trump stopped all trade talks. Canada then dropped the tax, and Trump said he had won. But behind that win, problems were growing. This wasn't just about taxes. It was about how Trump handles international deals. And now, that approach is starting to cause trouble he didn't expect.
We have a lot of supporters in the United States, including in the steel and aluminum industry, people who buy our steel and aluminum. So we're not playing, despite what Mr. Trump says, we actually have cards in our deck.
Trump's strategy is simple. Keep pushing until the other side gives in. He uses the same approach with China, Europe, and Canada. With Canada, he pushed hard. After months of rising tension, he threatened new tariffs and a major trade investigation unless Canada ended its digital tax. When Prime Minister Carney finally removed the tax, Trump claimed victory. He gave nothing back in return. The high tariffs on steel and cars stayed. The U.S. still treats Canada like a trade enemy, not a partner. For Trump, that was a win. But this aggressive style is causing more than just news headlines. It's causing damage. And now that damage is turning into pushback. Trump likes loud, bold moves. Carney is different. He plays smart and thinks long-term. After removing the tax, Canada didn't make a scene. No angry speeches. No big reactions. Instead, they quietly returned to trade talks. But this time, they had a clear goal. Get the U.S. to remove the tariffs that started the fight. Canada may be smaller, but it's very important in U.S. supply chains, especially for metals and cars. They're using that quietly to their advantage. Former diplomat Colin Robertson said it was a smart move. The digital tax had to go eventually, but by choosing the right moment, Carney made it seem like a compromise while still holding stronger cards. Now, Canada isn't just trying to fix the relationship. They want to reshape it. Trump's tough tactics haven't broken Canada. They've made it stronger and more determined to win behind the scenes.
Canadians in the U.S. who spoke with CTV News say Trump's looming foreign policy has cast a shadow of doubt on their future abroad.
Many Canadians now feel like outsiders. Some are afraid to cross the U.S. border. Even people with green cards worry they might be stopped or not allowed in. Families with children born in the U.S. fear being separated. This isn't just about politics anymore. It feels personal. Trump's foreign policy has made Canada seem more like an enemy than a friend, and Canadians have noticed. On Canada Day, the White House said nothing. No message about friendship or shared values. That silence felt intentional and made many feel like the close relationship is falling apart. Trade talks might continue, and a deal might even happen. But the harm Trump's approach is causing may not be easy to fix. By treating Canada as an opponent instead of a partner, he's caused a quiet but real change. Now, Canadians are feeling a new sense of national pride. They're becoming more cautious and starting to resist, not loudly, but in a strong and lasting way. In diplomacy, just winning isn't enough, especially when those wins come by losing trust.
Been screwed by Canada.
But Trump's anger at the trading relationship goes way back. One of the earliest beefs of his first term over Canada's dairy industry.
Going up to 400%. You never hear that. Canada's absolutely one of the worst.
It all started with some big numbers. 270%, then 300%, then 400%. President Donald Trump has often claimed that Canada puts huge taxes on American dairy products. But in late June 2025, things got worse. Trump suddenly stopped trade talks with Canada. He blamed Canada's dairy rules and its digital tax, saying the U.S. was being treated unfairly again. But this wasn't just about dairy or taxes. The real issue was deeper. Two countries fighting over how much control they should have over their own economies. And in the middle of it all, the ones suffering most were the dairy farmers on both sides of the border.
Representatives, Canada has been ripping us off for years. 250% tariff, which is taking advantage of our farmers.
Trump's focus on Canadian dairy didn't start in 2025. It began during his first term. Back then, he called Canada's dairy system a disgrace, and in 2018, forced Canada to give the U.S. access to 3.6% more of its dairy market during the USMCA trade deal talks. But that wasn't enough for him. In both the 2020 and 2024 elections, Trump brought the issue back, complaining about Canadian dairy tariffs as high as 270%, 298%, and even 400%. Technically, those high taxes do exist, but only when imports go over certain limits, called tariff rate quotas. These limits let a set amount of dairy in without taxes, and most of the time, they aren't even filled. For example, in 2024, Canada allowed 3.5 million kilograms of yogurt to come in without tariffs, but only 12% of that was actually imported. Still, Trump doesn't care about the details. For him, Canada's dairy system, with its set prices and guaranteed farmer income, goes against everything he wants to change.
Well, the uncertainty is killing us, and it's hurting American business. It's hurting Canadian business.
Even before Trump ended trade talks on June 27th, farmers were already feeling the pressure, and things got worse after that. In the U.S., dairy producers have become heavily dependent on Canada, which buys nearly 40% of North America's dairy exports. But with no clear future, buyers pull back. Prices dropped by $1.70 per 100 pounds of milk, according to the Bovine, causing some farmers to lose money. Extra milk piled up, and the U.S. government's aid, just $85 million, only covered about 7% of the losses. In Canada, the problem was different. Their supply management system protected farmers from price drops, but the export slowdown led to backlogs. Factories reduced production, especially of high-volume items like ultra-filtered milk. Ottawa quickly announced a $6.5 billion Canadian relief plan, but for many small towns, it wasn't enough. Experts say the total losses on both sides of the border are already over $1.2 billion, and still growing.
He's attacking Canadian families, workers, and businesses, and we cannot let him succeed.
For Canada, its dairy system, called supply management, is not up for debate. Government ministers have said clearly, Canada already made compromises in the USMCA deal. We won't give up more, especially under pressure. But Trump is increasing pressure. He's now linking dairy to national security, using issues like fentanyl and border control as reasons for new tariffs. Canadian officials rejected this, pointing out their strong cooperation with U.S. law enforcement. Provinces in Canada are now responding strongly too. British Columbia suggested fees on U.S. trucks. Ontario talked about adding a 25% surcharge on electricity. Even Alberta, which often disagrees with the federal government, has joined the national effort. Their message is clear. Canada will not trade dairy for metals or energy. Dairy is a small part of U.S.-Canada trade, just 0.1%, but has huge political importance. To Trump, it's a tool to fight what he sees as unfair trade. To Prime Minister Carney, it's part of Canada's identity and vital for rural communities. And to farmers, it's not about politics. It's their livelihood. Trump may say tariffs are beautiful, but for thousands of families in places like Wisconsin, Quebec, and Alberta, this is turning into a crisis. And if leaders don't find a solution soon, the real damage won't just be economic. It will be the loss of trust.
He has for a long time been fixated on dairy farmers in Canada. And he thinks the Canadian government is protecting a relatively small number of dairy farmers in Canada by putting, tariffs and quotas on U.S. dairy.
In most places, milk is just a drink. But between the U.S. and Canada, it now stands for a bigger problem. Rising trade tensions, political fights, and two different ideas about how to run the economy. The main issue is Canada's dairy system. It limits how much milk farmers can make and puts very high taxes, up to 300%, on extra milk from other countries. This system is designed to protect Canadian farmers and keep food prices steady.
Here's my problem with Canada. Canada was meant to be the 51st state because we subsidize Canada by $200 billion a year.
Under the USMCA trade deal, which replaced NAFTA, Canada agreed to let some American dairy products into its market without extra taxes, using special quotas. But U.S. officials say those quotas are being given to Canadian companies, making it very hard for American producers to benefit. What was meant to be a small fix for fair trade has turned into a problem, causing frustration, mistrust, and even revenge because of what it sees as unfair treatment. The U.S. government has added new tariffs on many Canadian products, not just dairy, but also lumber, aluminum, and steel.
Deal with is Canada. The people that, now this was Trudeau, the people that good old Justin, I call him Governor Trudeau, his people were nasty. And they weren't telling the truth. They never told the truth. You know that, they'd say, well, we don't charge. Well, they do. They charge tremendous.
Then another issue added to the conflict. Canada's 3% digital services tax. It targeted big tech companies operating in Canada, most of which are American, like Google, Amazon, and Meta. The U.S. strongly opposed the tax, calling it unfair and aimed only at U.S. companies. Canada defended the tax, saying it was about fairness in the digital economy. But the U.S. responded by threatening to leave ongoing trade talks. As tensions grew, Canada announced a $6.5 billion support package to help its producers. At the same time, it introduced the One Canadian Economy Act, a plan to strengthen its own economy by removing trade barriers between provinces. This would help Canada stay strong if U.S. exports drop further. By this point, the conflict was clearly no longer just about dairy.
We find that they're charging us over 200% for dairy products. You know about that. And when I left, we had that well taken care of. But under Biden, they just kept raising it. Very difficult to deal with the Canadian.
The effects of the conflict are already showing on both sides of the U.S.-Canada border. In Canada, public opinion has turned sharply against the U.S. social media, is full of calls to boycott American products, and some stores have even removed U.S. dairy and meat from their shelves. In the U.S., dairy farmers, especially in states like Wisconsin and Minnesota, are suffering big losses. With Canada cutting back on imports, millions of gallons of milk are being wasted or sold at very low prices. Many family farms are close to going out of business. Meanwhile, the tech world is paying attention. If Canada's digital tax works, other countries might copy it. This could lead to new taxes on American tech companies in Europe and Asia, reducing their profits and creating legal and business problems. Legal experts are warning that the whole USMCA trade deal is at risk. If either side files official complaints with the WTO or uses punishment rules in the deal, the idea of free trade in North America could start falling apart.
Last night I had a good conversation with President Trump, and we agreed to recommence our negotiations with a view to the 21st of July deadline.
This didn't begin as a major global issue. It started with milk. But today, trade is about more than just products. It's about power, values, and who controls the rules. When trading partners turn into rivals and economic tools are used like weapons, the damage goes far beyond just taxes. Trust is lost, markets change, and people get hurt. This is no longer just a fight over dairy. It's about the future of the global economy and who will be left behind if it falls apart.